Welcome to Glory Days. I'm Nick Brooks, and today we're going to be talking football. As Euro 2024 fades into the distance, let's look back on the tournament 2 decades ago, which spawned one of the unlikeliest underdog stories in history. Going into the tournament, no one gave Greece a shot in hell. It's easy to understand why. They'd never scored a goal at a major tournament. In their last appearance, a decade earlier, they'd lost 3 out of 3, conceding 10 in the process. They hadn't made the Euros since 1980. They had no star players and had been unceremoniously shoved into a group of death with Spain, Portugal and Russia. Plus, this was a golden age for European sides. England had Beckham, Rooney and Scholes. France, Henry, Zidane and Vieira. The Netherlands, Van Nistelrooy, Robben and Sneijder. And that was just the start. In hindsight, the 150-1 odds bookies were offering on Greece seem short. Even at home, there was little excitement, let alone expectation over Greece's return to the top table of international football. The Greek press and public were far more interested in the rivalry between Olympiakos, Panathinaikos and AEK Athens. With the bulk of players drawn from these 3 clubs, the national side had often lacked unity. The team didn't even have its own training centre, with one administrator describing it as a travelling circus. Worst of all, players felt turning out for Greece wasn't a privilege, but a chore. But one man was on a mission to change all that. Otto Rehhagel arrived in Greece from Germany with a reputation. During 14 years in charge of Werder Bremen, he transformed the club from also-rans to Bayern's biggest rivals. Why, aged 63, he opted to take an unglamorous, dead-end job with Greece is anyone's guess, but Rehhagel is eccentric. Still, he must have shuddered as he watched his team surrender 5-1 to Finland in his first game in charge. The first weeks weren't going well. Rehhagel spoke no Greek. Still basing himself in Germany, he had little understanding of local culture and was struggling to stitch the squad together. Knives were out from the start. But he wasn't one to wilt. Instead, he quickly employed Yannis Topolidis, a Greek coach who'd spent much of his career in Germany, as his assistant. Topolidis would play a vital role, translating Rehhagel's instructions, but also bridging a vast cultural divide. The manager had a strict, no-nonsense approach. Sometimes, Topolidis took it upon himself to soften his messages to the players. Meanwhile, the manager went about overhauling the squad and implementing a system that could catapult Greece towards success. Pragmatism, industry, and resilience would become buzzwords. Rehhagel told his players they'd have to put club rivalries to the side and focus on the national team first. And although no one noticed, Greece came on leaps and bounds, going on a 15-game unbeaten run from October 2002 to March 2004. Whenever anyone questioned the team's ability, Rehhagel would respond by saying, "They don't know what we know." Still, the players' only hope was that they could compete with pride at Euro 2004. Even a modest target like getting out of the group seemed too much of a stretch. In place of big names, they had long ones. Stelios Yiannakopoulos of Bolton fame, in to back up Georgios Karagounis, soon to be cult figure Antonis Nikopolidis. 15 of the 23 played for Greece's Big 3. Bizarrely, backup striker Demis Nicolaides had just led a consortium in their purchase of the bankrupt AEK, whose players hadn't been paid since April. This squad was certainly not without tension. Of the 16 teams at the tournament, Greece were ranked second to last, and they were given the unenviable task of opening the Euros against host Portugal in a Porto stadium packed to the rafters with 50,000 passionate fans. Ahead of the game, one commentator warned, it might not be pretty. But Rehhagel had a plan. His team would pressure their opponents with man-to-man marking, a system which had fallen out of footballing fashion. Traianos Delos would be employed as a sweeper. Channeling Greek history, Rehhagel told him to protect the box as though he were the Colossus of Rhodes. He convinced his players they were as good as anyone and instilled in them the belief that they had nothing to lose. Unbelievably, his tactics brought instant returns. In the 7th minute, Karagounis robbed Paulo Ferreira and scored with a 30-yard dribbling shot. Going 1-0 up did wonders for Greece. Now they could focus on defensive intensity without worrying too much about creation. Early in the second half, they stole the ball again and broke with speed, winning a penalty. Angelos Bassinas slammed home into the top corner. Greece were in dreamland. One game into the tournament, the nation's expectations had already been exceeded. But Greece's schedule wouldn't get any easier. Next up was a clash against Spain. Fans flooded across the border, ensuring Porto Stadium was once again painted red. When Fernando Morientes rifled home, it looked as though Greece were back to their old losing ways. But they dug in and found an equaliser, 4 points from 2 games. People back home were starting to get excited. Still, their progression to the quarterfinals remained in the balance. And their final group game against Russia was a disaster. Greece conceded moments after kickoff and were 2-0 down within 20 minutes. But crucially, they managed to strike a consolation just before half-time. As the final whistle blew, there was confusion amongst the players until one of the substitutes ran on and gave them the green light to start celebrating. Level on points and goal difference with Spain, Greece had gone through by virtue of scoring more goals. They'd qualified by the barest of margins. A quarter-final against France felt like a dubious reward. Ahead of the game, Rehagel criticised the French for being full of themselves, insisting his team had a chance. Yet the players didn't share his belief. It's been a good run, they told each other. Let's enjoy the game and get ready to go home. A number of them made plans to attend weddings or go on summer holidays. They just had 90 minutes against Henry, Zidane and Trezeguet to get through first. Ahead of the game, Rehagel emphasised the idea of controlled offence. He told the players this would be like a boxing match. If they went in all guns blazing, they'd get knocked out. They had to defend, only attacking on counters or corners. Setoridis was tasked with man-marking Thierry Henry. His manager told him, he doesn't know who you are, but after the game, he'll never forget you. Greece were prepared to absorb pressure. Throughout the match, France was stifled and suffocated by a wall of white shirts. And every now and then, they'd lump the ball forward and create a half chance of their own. You felt, surely, France would break them down eventually. But with the match into its last half hour, an error from Lizarazu gave Setoridis time to pick a cross. He found the unmarked Haristeas on the edge of the 6-yard box, whose bullet header flew past Barthez. Greece were through to a semi-final. This was the ultimate Cinderella story, yet not everyone was enamoured with Rehagel's tactics. Le Monde described the performance against France as an ugly disgrace to the beautiful game. The Guardian felt the team were the only old underdogs in history that everyone wants to see get beaten. Sure, it wasn't tiki-taka, but weren't these smug aficionados missing the point? Greece didn't have the players to try and out-football Spain or France. If they were lacking in guile, they made up for it with grit, guts and gumption. And when chances came their way, they were rarely squandered. Unfortunately, PR wasn't the side's only problem. Ahead of the semi, the players threatened a walkout as relations grew strained with the Greek FA over tournament bonuses. The issue was resolved, but it wasn't ideal preparation for a match against what many felt were the best team in the tournament. The Czech Republic had arguably the best keeper in the world, the dynamic strike partnership of Baros and Koller, and a midfield powered by Nedved, Rosicky and Poborski. And they came out flying. In the opening stages, Rosicky thundered a volley against the crossbar. Nikopolidis had to make good stops to keep it level through the first half. But when Nedved went down injured, some of the belief seemed to seep out of the Czechs. The game was drifting towards extra time, but there was always going to be one big moment. With 10 minutes left on the clock, Rosicky teed up Koller, providing the big man with a gilt-edged opportunity. First time, he put his laces through the ball, but fired wide, the wrong side of the post. Moments later, Baros did the same after making a mazy run into the box. If you were Greek, you were starting to believe. The game was going to extra time. This felt like destiny. And after going forward for the best part of 90 minutes, the Czechs had worn themselves out. Now Rehagel's message changed. Attack, attack, attack. Suddenly, Petr Cech and his back four were facing an aerial bombardment. Out of nowhere, Greece looked the team more likely to score. On the brink of 105 minutes, they won a corner. Delas, who'd been magnificent all evening, got free at the front post and managed a glancing header. Arms waved aloft as the ball bulged in the back of the net. The short-lived silver goal rule mean the sides wouldn't have to play the second half. Greece were heading to a European final. Still, the squad remained beset with tension. A couple of days before the final, they sat down for a team meeting designed to clear the air. Keepers Nicopolidis and Chalkias weren't speaking. Basinas was still arguing with the big bosses over bonus payments, and apparently there were issues between Rehagel and defender Michalis Kapsis. But an open discussion helped the team to move past their problems. Deep down, they all knew this was a once-in-a-lifetime shot at history. Nothing else mattered. Still, the cards were stacked heavily in favour of their opponents. Portugal had already seen Greece's stifling tactics up close. They had a whole nation emphatically behind them and would be backed by hordes of screaming fans in Lisbon's Estadio da Luz. And they had the better players, the creative might of Figo, Deco and Ronaldo, with Nuno Gomes and Rui Costa lurking on the bench. Not that that bothered Greece. By this stage, they were well used to being the underdogs. Up till now, Rehagel had always given the team a pre-match motivational speech, but it was abandoned ahead of the final. His message now was simple: I believe in you. Go do it for Greece. Incredibly, the Greek people had flooded the stadium in Lisbon and were making their presence felt on streets in cities across the world. In 2004, long before the emergence of the Greek freak or Stefanos Tsitsipas, the country had no modern sporting achievements to celebrate. Making it to the final of a major competition was a miracle. But fans would have 90 nervy minutes to endure. From kick-off, Portugal dominated the ball, but Greece's anti-football was keeping them at bay. No matter what they tried, they couldn't forge a clear-cut chance, and on the stroke of an hour, Greece got the ball forward and won a corner. It wasn't a classic goal. Basinas delivered to the middle of the box. Portugal's keeper, Ricardo, tried to come and claim it, but found himself stranded behind a sea of bodies in no man's land. Meanwhile, Haristeas got in front of his marker and headed into the open net. Greece had one hand on the trophy. Going 1-0 down shocked the Portuguese into life. Ronaldo and Figo passed up good chances in the dying embers. Somehow, Greece had done it. Flags fluttered and fireworks exploded in the sky across Athens. As Theodoros Zagorakis hoisted the trophy, it was hard not to smile no matter where you were from. Greek mythology had a new, unfathomable chapter. For the players and for Rehagel, this was a dream come true. No amount of scorn from the international community could dampen their celebrations. This was a Herculean achievement. In the absence of star players, Greece relied on spirit and structure to repeatedly overcome the odds. And how many players stood up during the course of the tournament? Nicopolidis was unflappable between the sticks. Delas, Kapsis and Seitoridis absorbed everything thrown at them. Zagorakis brought pugnacity in the middle of the park. Up top, Haristeas never stopped working and struck with huge headers when chances presented themselves. Fittingly, this was a flash-in-the-pan success. Greece didn't qualify for the World Cup in 2006 and lost all their games at Euro 2008. They didn't make this year's Euros, nor the 4 major tournaments that preceded it. But for a brief moment, they were on top of the footballing world. It feels strange that so many pundits prefer to gloss over 2004, getting hung up on Greece's style or lack thereof, rather than focusing on the incredible underdog story. After all, has modern football seen another upset like this? Drop me a line and tell me your thoughts.